All right. Good afternoon. My name is George Ganal, and hopefully you have seat belts so you can buckle up for a rather fast ride. Got 45 minutes to cover stuff that I normally cover in 2 or 3 weeks, so we'll see what happens. So, just a bit about myself. I've been with Interactive Intelligence and Genesys for 20 years now. Everybody remembers, I know some of you probably do, 1.2F version of Interaction Center back in the day. That's when I joined. That's why I date myself for versions. And I've been doing PureConnect, Pure Cloud stuff pretty much the whole time. Did a stint in development, managed the install, build and documentation team, so learned a bit about the development side, then came back and worked in education. A lot of the time, done a lot of consulting, internal and external to the company. Today we're going to be talking about a number of things. The main focus is IVR, and IVR being a general term these days, it could be auto attendant, it could be IVR. Back in the day, auto attendant was just all the menus and announcing stuff and transferring you, and IVR was database dips and getting information to the caller. These days, it's pretty much the same thing, so we're going to presume IVR means everything. I'm going to be going over Interaction Attendant. That's going to be the main interface you use for IVR. Handlers, you can. Anybody here remember the day or still use just handlers for their IVR? Yeah, you can still do that if you want to. And I'll show you that. Intelligent Automation, I'll touch on briefly. And it's not something we can get into in depth because there's just not enough time to cover it even in an hour. Putting it all together, and some other slides at the end. So, Interaction Attendant. Let me just flip over. Talk about a number of things in there. If I can get to the right one. So, Interaction Attendant. How many here have never used Interaction Attendant before? So, a few people. Okay, real quick, whirlwind tour. Interaction Attendant is a graphical interface. It's meant for setting up all of your IVR settings, so all your menuing for Interaction Center. And it has the ability to connect to multiple servers even at the same time if you want to. At the top level, you've got the IC server that you're talking to. You can, under the file menu, disconnect from that one, connect to another one, depending on which one you want to work with. Below the server level, you have one or more profiles, and profile is basically a set of operations that pertain to a specific set of criteria. So for profiles, if I want custom profiles, I can set them up to be based upon incoming call selection criteria, such as the DNIS, the number that was dialed to get to the system. I can set up to pick a profile based upon that. I can set up to pick a profile based upon the ANI, the number they called from, or what line or line group they called in on. So different criteria. Then also I can choose multiple criteria. I can say if they called this number and it comes in from this ANI, then I'm going to do this profile. And those sort top to bottom, basically. Most specific to least specific. So if you have two different profiles that actually match the criteria for the call coming in, whichever one's higher on the list is the one that takes priority. So you have to be careful when you're setting up your profile order. It'll also usually pop up and warn you, hey, these two profiles kind of match the same criteria. Only the one that's on top will ever get picked. So it does try to warn you. Below profile level, you've got schedules, one or more schedules. So, for example, here I've got a couple of different schedules. A schedule is designed to be the time of day, day of the week, day of the month, whatever that the schedule itself is going to be running. So if the system picks a profile, it will then drop down and try to pick the correct schedule based upon the current date time. And it could be that you just have a default schedule that runs all the time. It covers 24/7, 365, or 366 days a year. Or you can have specific schedules that are set up for different criteria. Could be daily, could be certain days of the week, could be a yearly schedule, could be monthly schedules. Scroll down here. So a certain day of the month, or certain days of the month, a range of days. It could be unplanned, where it's just turned on when you need it, or it could be system schedules. If you work with professional services, they tend to go more towards system schedules, and then have you set them all up in Interaction Administrator, and reference them here from Interaction Attendant. So it just depends on how you want to set up your schedule. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes, but that's the next level down. And that's also going to be the menu that presents options to the caller. So when somebody calls in, picks a profile, picks a schedule, starts playing the options that are set up in Interaction Attendant. You know, for this, press 1, for that, press 2, and so on. If you look at the default profile, default schedule, you'll notice some operations already built in. Gives you a flavor of some things you can do. Some of the basic operations. Escape the operator, dial 0, where's it going to go? Dialing an extension. One thing to note, you can turn on each menu the option to listen for extension dialing, and then people start pressing numbers. They could listen for an extension, or wait until the 2.5 seconds in between dialing numbers to say it timed out and moves on to the menu option. That's not real successful most of the time. Usually people get into a menu, they press 1, it waits 2 seconds, and they're thinking that it just didn't hear them, so they press 1 again, and then it really messes things up. So usually you have option 1 or something like that for dialing extensions specifically, and listen for extensions. Dialing by name, so you can set it up to listen for DTMF to dial first name, last name, find somebody in the company directory, or limit it to a specific queue, for example, work group. And then the extended menu, don't know how many of you have actually dealt with that, but it's a hidden menu. It's not announced in the main menu by default. And it has things such as playing the station information. If you're troubleshooting a phone, I use this a lot in the old days because it would actually, well, I'm dating myself. It would play back the board and port that a phone was plugged into, so I could figure out, okay, why is this phone ringing when I'm calling that person's extension? Oh, it's plugged into this board and port instead of the one I thought it was. But dial star 91 pound, it would actually play back the station information and let me know which station I'm dealing with. Queue monitoring, so you can just call in. This is used for customers who want to call in and listen to queues. They can dial in, put in a user extension password, and actually start listening to calls coming into queues. Fairly handy for people that want to be able to monitor remotely, just by phone, not through some interface. Call pickup, you can dial this option, pick up a call that's ringing on another station. You have the rights to do it. The agent log in, log out, star 98. Log into some station, take ACD calls on that station without ever having to run the client. A handy option that's in there, built in by default. And unified messaging, the one that most of you know, star 99, extension, password, pound, to get into your remote options menu, listen to your voicemail, change your status, set up your other admin options, turn on and off schedules, unplanned schedules in Attendant if you have the rights, and so on. So a lot of functionality in just that basic default menu. Get what I'm supposed to do? Okay, so interface. I mentioned speech recognition real quick. Built in all these menus, we do have that speech recognition option if you have it turned on. So configuring speech recognition, it has to be turned on the server, on the IC server in the Interaction Administrator interface, but then you do have the option to use the built-in speech recognition, built-in Interaction Center, to listen for various things within the menu. So you can set it up, you can do your basic, to dial by name, press or say 2, or to contact customer service, press or say 3. Or you get a little bit more detailed than that if you want to. But it's built in, not something you have to pay extra for. I mentioned custom profiles, I mentioned schedules. I want to talk a couple more things about schedules real quick. If you've ever dealt with schedules, you'll find that you need to use a mix of system schedules and the schedules that are built into Interaction Attendant. With Attendant, you can get most of what you want by the schedules that are in here. Daily schedules, you're just going to run 7 days a week. You choose the hours of the day it's going to run. That's fairly simple. Weekly, you can choose which days of the week you want it to run, and then within those days, what hours you want it to run. You may notice up here it says runs from Sunday 12 a.m. to Sunday 12 a.m. Runs for 0 seconds. Not really. It runs 1 week at a time. You could put in runs through Saturday at 11:59 p.m., but the way it's set up, 12 a.m. to 12 a.m. Sunday is the whole week. You could limit that and say, oh, I only want it to run Monday 8 a.m. till Friday 8 p.m., but there's no real sense to it because you're limiting that down below and off on the side here by picking the days of the week that it's going to run. So keep it simple. Monthly stuff. Here I can say, okay, start on the first day of the month, end on whatever day of the month. Once again, it goes first to first, and that just means the whole month, or I can limit it for days in between, and then I can say what hours should it run on those days during the month. Yearly schedule, those are really for a single day or a small stretch of days during the year. Now, here's one thing I want to point out. Let's say in the U.S. you want to set up Memorial Day as your holiday schedule. How do you do that using this yearly schedule?
Depends. Because the holidays change, so that's why it's easy to set it up. I think in like admin on those ones because they're floaters.
Yeah.
You can just change them all and then have them on multiple flows.
Yeah, that's the point I'm getting to right there. Yeah. I cannot say run the last Monday of May every year, or whatever other relative holiday you have. So you flip over and you would actually go into schedules, which I'm sure somebody can explain to me why they're under people, but I've never really gotten an answer. It's been that way for 20 years. I don't think they're going to change it now.
Because it depends on when people work.
Yeah.
No, it depends on which developer is writing the code that
We're just trying to help.
I always answer with, I never tell you why a developer did something, because you just can't. So yeah, you would set up a Memorial Day schedule, and it could be a yearly, and here's where you can set up a relative schedule, say the last Monday of May, for example, and just run it all day, something like that. So there you set up a relative schedule, save it, and then you can jump over to this schedule, and you could use system. Although it's not showing up there. Why not? Because, of course, we don't synchronize on the fly with Interaction Attendant. You have to go click on your server, right-click, choose Refresh Data, and then it should show up. Wherever it was. So now the system schedule should show up there. I can add it in. And then I could add multiple holidays in here. That's the other nice thing about system schedules is I could write up multiple schedules and apply them to the same profile or the same schedule level. Instead of having to write 5 different schedules under the profile, I could write one schedule and then have these system schedules apply to it. And then it picks the most relevant schedule that exists in the list of schedules, the most specific one. Speaking of most specific, once again, go back to my weekly before I forget. Whenever you close this schedule window, whichever one you're highlighted on is the one that's going to apply, so be careful. If you're just clicking around looking at stuff, you might mess up your system if you click on the wrong one and then publish. When it's choosing a schedule, it goes to the most specific time frame, but if there's overlap, then it can't choose which one is the most specific out of the schedules. It picks the one that's highest in the list. So be careful with that. All right. Make sure I don't go over too much time here. There's a lot of stuff to cover. Just real quick, there are a bunch of different operations that we could talk about in here in Interaction Attendant. Some of the most useful ones that you'll use in just about every IVR. You'll probably use the dial by name operation, which allows you, once again, to decide whether you're going by first name, last name, waiting for a unique match, how many characters you want, that type of thing. Little known fact, if you put in 4 characters here, and somebody puts in 3 characters, it'll time out after about 3 seconds, and it'll use the 3 characters to do a match anyhow. It doesn't care if you don't put in full 4 characters. It'll match on whatever you put in. But you want it to match 4 characters. It'll announce that. The dial extension, fairly simple there, disconnect. Fax back, you're probably not going to use that a whole lot. People do still use fax. Yes, they do. I've run into it quite a bit. Caller data entry is one that you'll use a fair amount when you want to gather input from the caller. And you can put a caller data entry pretty much any place within your whole attendant structure. And I don't know how many people know this, but let's say I want to do a callback, and I get to the callback operation, and I need to get the caller data entry from someplace else. I can actually have that callback point to the caller data entry. It doesn't matter where it is in the structure. It'll go there, it'll gather their phone number, play it back, verify it, and then jumps back to that callback operation. So I don't have to do the caller data entry first. I can actually just jump there, come back to where I am, and it doesn't really care that it's not actually in that same schedule, that same multi-action container, whatever, as the callback that I'm working with. So that's one of the neat features that not everybody knows about. We have audio playback. You just want to play some audio to the caller for whatever reason. A menu. So if you want to do a sub-menu, as in this extended menu, you can add in a sub-menu below a schedule or another menu, or stack them several deep. One you may use a fair amount would be language selection. So you can set the language that the system is going to use for playbacks. You have to have that language installed on the system. You have to have prompts in that language. But you can change the language that's being used in Attendant. And once you do a language selection, it changes it for every prompt that's going to play from the system. Callbacks, we'll talk about in a minute. Multi-action container is a useful one. You'll see some here. For example, that's not one. Go back up. Yeah, the same as this one. Here's a multi-action container. It's got a bunch of different actions in it. The one thing to point out with the multi-action container, several things. You have to have a default action, so choose whichever one you want to run by default. And then down below, you'll notice it has that option, jump to the next node in the container. It's actually a best practice. Instead of saying jump to the next node, it's preferable that you jump to a custom location and pick the next node you want it to go to, just because somebody may rearrange the order without thinking about it, or something else may happen to change the order of those actions, and then that messes up your functionality. So it's better, best practice, to say jump to a custom location and tell which step specifically you want it to go to next, instead of next location. That's the main stuff there. Another one, custom subroutine Initiator. This allows you to run a custom subroutine. It doesn't really care what name you put in here for subroutine. You can put anything you want in it. You can put 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't matter, whatever you put in there. You have to modify the custom subroutine Initiator router handler to match up with whatever you put in here. So, let's say I call subroutine, wherever I have one. So I'm calling a subroutine named Intelligent Automation. And if I go to my custom subroutine Initiator router, you'll see that I have it set up, P_S subroutine name equals Intelligent Automation. So it's that passed in variable. And that one's actually tying to a handler that's saying something a little bit different, SLM _ IA _ integration. Doesn't care that the subroutine has a different name. But you have to modify this handler, or else that custom subroutine call will not work from Attendant. Remember that bit. Another one you may use fairly often is set attribute. So you can set an attribute on the interaction and then pass it into a subroutine and then pull that attribute off in the subroutine. It's a fairly useful operation. You can also, when you have attributes within your subroutines that are coming back to interaction attendant, so they come back into here, and if I want to use the attribute, let's say, trying to get to a place where I can actually type it in, but if you want to use an attribute, you can reference it any place within interaction attendant with that $, paren, name of the attribute, close paren. So you can use attributes coming from subroutines, you can set them, pass them back and forth, and then you can actually reference them in interaction attendant. It could be a workgroup name, it could be a number of different things you might want to use. Checking the value of an attribute when it comes back from a subroutine, that kind of thing. But you can reference them using $ and then the attribute name inside parentheses. Just something to be aware of there. Handy thing to know. I messed that one up. I can't remember what it was named. Okay. That's just a quick look at some standard inbound operations. Real quick. Any questions so far? Not yet. Everybody's sitting here saying, I know all this stuff. Okay.
George, what was the name of that handler?
Custom subroutine initiator router.
It's custom subroutine initiator router, but the easiest thing to do when you're on one of these subroutine calls. So let's say I go back to that subroutine call. I just hit the form help. There's a little form help button up here, and that actually, for the run subroutine, links right to that information on the handler. So that's the easiest way to remember. Okay. And it gives you the whole setup on how to configure it properly. One other thing to look at would be queue operations. And this one I'll go into a little bit more detail on because it's something you're going to use a fair amount in interaction attendant if you're not wanting to do full custom workgroup queue configuration. Because you can go in and you can set up the whole music, and the ACD wait music, and you can do how many times it loops around and menus and all that kind of stuff. Can be done in handlers with custom workgroup queues, but it's really a lot easier to do it here in interaction attendant and just set it up using the queue operations that are available. So here, for example, I've got a transfer to customer service. So I'm transferring using the group transfer to this customer service work group. Another option that's been around for a few years is actually this work group or station group specified by this attribute. I could just transfer to whatever is stored in this attribute, EIC_at dynamic work group name. So I could actually just have one transfer, one group transfer in my structure, and I could have 10 different menus where I set the name of the work group that I want to transfer to, I set the skills I want to transfer using, and then I just do a menu transfer over to that group transfer, and it feeds in the work group name, it feeds in the skills names, and just does it all, so I have a much cleaner interaction attendant interface. Some people get confused by that because it's like, okay, how do I keep track of where it's going with work groups being called? Prefer to use the names here, whichever way works best for you. But this one, I'm transferring to this work group. And then right below it, I'm using a queue audio. So this queue audio up here is used to play multiple things. I can play position in queue. They'll note from all the customer contact center folks out there, never play position in queue to a customer. Not recommended. Estimated wait time, that's fine. You can play the estimated wait time. Usually you play it at the beginning. You don't keep playing the estimated wait time because what happens when you have priorities on customers coming in or VIPs coming in the same queue with non-VIPs, you know, okay, you're platinum, gold, silver, and dirt level customers. Dirt level customer, here's their estimated wait time, go from 3 minutes to 5 minutes to 15 minutes to half an hour to Packard Bell, 4 hours in the old days. How many used to walk around at home with the phone on speakerphone waiting for Packard Bell to pick up? Yeah, trying to date myself again. So estimated wait time, can play that. And then right here, right after this estimated wait time, I've got this queue menu. Throwing in a menu was a couple of options. Hey, do you want to wait in this queue, or do you want to get a call back? So when an agent comes available, we can place a call back to you. Give them those two options. Default, wait in queue, so that's a queue stay operation. And it's the default action. If they don't choose an option, it's going to stay in queue. Or we can do a callback. This will generate a callback in the system, dump it into the queue, and disconnect their call. And then it'll call them back when an agent comes available and receives this callback request. I did the easy route. I just set it to call back to the ANI info on the call. As I mentioned, you could do callback to the phone number entered in the caller data entry node, and then just go jump to that node, get the phone number, and then jump back here. Then I'll play some ACD wait music. Everybody love this music? Yeah, I used to have the CD for that. I could have sold it for millions on eBay, I'm sure, but I lost it somewhere along the way. Play the whole music, and here's a custom message. If you want to use an audio source, set that up in Interaction Administrator. You can play from an audio source that's streaming into the system, and that way you can set it up to play for 30 seconds and then do an advertisement, and then play again for 30 more seconds and then do something else, and so on. In this case, it'll just play until this ends. Then I do my nice little thank you for holding. And then I do a repeat. So I go back to the wait music. I play it 3 times total because I'm repeating twice. And then once it's done with the repeats, it jumps back up to the top. And in this case, it'll play the estimated wait time again. Let them know how far back in the queue they've fallen. And then give them another chance to do the callback or continue to wait in queue. So some of the options within the group transfer queue options. You'll notice you have anything with a Q at the bottom of it. This is a word to the wise. Anything that has a Q on it, and you set it in Interaction Attendant, actually does apply to custom ACD work groups as well. So if I were to set this menuing, then I don't have to worry about manually programming the menus in a handler like we used to in the old days. But anything without the Q on it will not actually function for custom work groups. You have to go set up functionality manually in the custom ACD audio handler. So that's a quick look at transfer to queue, because that's something you do a fair amount of. Any questions there real quick? Okay. Check the real clock instead of my watch. My watch stopped earlier. I might be here till 6 o'clock. And then mention some extended operations. Some of the handy ones. Let me just go ahead and let's see. I'll throw something in here so I don't mess anything up too much. You've got a remote data query. If you've ever played with SOAP, this is actually fairly useful. You can do a remote data query off to a SOAP-based web service. I don't know how many people still use SOAP-based web services. There's no REST-based web service call from within here. But you could actually, and I've seen it set up, you could create your own REST-based web service as an intermediary and have it be SOAP on one side, and then it sends out a REST-based query to some other service, and then it gets the answer back, and then feeds it back through SOAP to the IC server. Kind of cumbersome, but you can do it. So you put in your URL, the SOAP action, and then you'd have the XML you put right in here, and then you get the outputs that come back. You have to match all of the outputs correctly based upon the WSDL for the SOAP web service. Match it from the attribute names here. And then you can play with that data. You can pass it into the subroutine wherever you want to do. So you can do SOAP calls. You can play it back within Interaction Attendant even. An example of that is through the play info. Because of the play info, you can actually play attributes that you pull back from a subroutine or from a web service or whatever. So you can set up a whole audio sequence to play information back to a customer. So instead of just having a one play audio action and do one and another and another and another, you can just string them all together in one audio sequence. It also has capability for playing date times, a lot of other information coming from the interaction. It's a really handy action to be able to use, or operation, excuse me. I keep saying actions because PureConnect Architect says actions and Attendant says operations. I always call PureConnect Architect Interaction Architect. It's just, the world is messed up. Also, screen pop allows you to configure a screen pop action in Interaction Administrator, and then you can set it here so that when a call transfers to a worker queue, for example, you can set a screen pop. You can have it pop up an application that's running on the desktop, and then the agent has that application running. You can have a custom DLL, put it in a special folder on the server or on the client machine, and it'll just pop up that application that uses that DLL. But you have to set it all up in Interaction Administrator and then set it up here as a screen pop. And there are optional values you can pass in. If you want to add in for the value, you can put in an attribute using that $, paren, attribute name, close paren, if you want to. Screen pop's fairly useful. Selection step is also fairly useful. You have a logical transfer, which allows you basically two options, but a selection allows you to put in multiple criteria. Well, one, say data about the current call, for example, and I could look at a specific call attribute. And then down below, if that attribute matches whatever, let's say the attribute is true, it takes this path, and then I can put below that, I can put in operations, I can run a subroutine, I can do whatever I want to below each case. So I can have multiple cases in there. One thing that I'm looking at, multiple matching expressions, and it's kind of like a selection tool step in a handler that allows you to just go down and choose the expression that best matches and take action based on that. Too far. Another thing that's not fairly recent anymore, you can set up surveys in Interaction Center, and then you can call a survey from Interaction Attendant. So if you want to dump somebody into a survey, you can do it through that survey tool. Just kind of useful. One thing I want to mention before I go too far off track, on the transfer to customer service, you have this option here for queue update skills. I've been told over and over again by our folks, don't ever use that in Attendant. It tends to mess things up, especially for statistics. Never a good idea, according to them, for stripping off skills while it's in Attendant. Just an aside there. Okay, those are major operations, main operations. Any quick questions there? Anything you've always wondered about, not sure what it was for, or would like to know?
So can you say one more thing about skills? So you say it's not recommended as easier and move.
That's what I've been told many times, especially at professional services, that we should not add or modify skills from Attendant on the calling queue. Mainly because it messes with statistics and it gets people upset.
Well, the original skills are still assigned there.
The original skills are assigned on this group transfer, yes. So if I wanted to assign skills, I would do it here, but I would not change them while it's sitting in queue.
Oh.
Because that other one is for changing the skills while it's waiting in queue, and that can cause some difficulties on statistics mainly. Question back there.
I'm just going to make a point to that skilling thing. So you add or remove skills with those nodes, it actually takes it out of the queue. and then puts it back in with the new skills, so your caller's position resets. So that's the big difference.
That's another thing that, yeah, another thing that messes it up. Okay. Yeah.
The one thing I wanted to say was thank you for showing the callbacks in that one node, because when we reached out to professional services and got onboarded, they actually built it where the callbacks were actually in a separate node, and it jumped in and out of it, and that inflated our statistics. And so for like 2 years, we didn't know why. Like, we had 3 inbound interactions for 1 callback. And it's because it literally left that flow and went out of one node to another. We wouldn't know.
Yeah, not sure why they would have done that, but they had a reason, I'm sure.
Quite sure. I wasn't there when it happened.
Yeah, I have seen reasons why they do it sometimes, but it's not normal. All right, let's see. Handlers, and then just going into IVR with handlers. Got interaction attendant entry point, and back in the day, many, many moons ago, 1.3, 4 time frame, attendant actually had an option there. Well, originally you had to turn it on. It wasn't on by default. You had to actually put the right version of interaction attendant entry point in there and turn it on. And then after that, there's a version where you could turn it off, and it would just have the interaction attendant entry point, and then it would have active set to false. It would pass that variable back up to the calling handler, and then it would just go on into system IVR, which was functionality, which is completely handler-based IVR system. That's still available if you want to play with it that way. What I've done is, instead of turning off attendant in here, I went into that custom attendant entry point, which is right after the first step in the handle of the initiator, and I run system IVR, and then I set B _B transferred equal to true, which tells interaction attendant entry point, okay, the functionality was transferred away from attendant, so it's going to kill the attendant entry point handler. And now it's going to completely run with system IVR and below. System IVR is not active by default in the system. It's there, but it's not published, so you should still be able to find it. System IVR, and then within System IVR, you have a bunch of the old functionality still there, for those who remember back to the old days. So here you've got all the old handlers built IVR functionality, even with, does this menu exist? Play the prompt. If it's not there, then play the EIC default menu.wave file. Built back in the day. You've got success on gathering DTMF. And then there's the system IVR customizations that it jumps into if they didn't dial 0 for the main menu. The system IVR customizations actually still has all that old functionality in it too. Everybody remembers the old press 2 for dial by name and press 6 for receiving a fax and all those other things in there. I added in press 3 for my sales order lookup. So if I go back into just purely handlers-based IVR, I can do that, run into my subroutine here, sales order lookup, and that actually feeds into some database functionality. And that's part of my IVR, read stuff back from a database. So they get into that menuing, press 3 because they want to do an order lookup, prompts them, they put in their order ID number, and it starts going through and it does a lookup to the database. Something I want to point out real quick here. Notice these 2 steps, get structured parameter. I don't know how many people have used those before, but you don't necessarily want somebody to know what the username and password is for the database to log in and get data out of it. So handler developers don't need to know what those values are. I've got structured parameters set up, and here I've got one for password, and it's set as a secret. So set it as secret, put in the password here, it's blocked off, nobody can read it. Username, same thing. And then in my handler, I get those structured parameters out of Interaction Administrator. And then when I do the login, the DB open, I'm using the DB login name, DB login password for the username and password. Yeah.
When you're debugging, are you?
Yes, I know. I was going to mention that. When you put it in debug mode, if you're allowed to debug the handler, yes, you can see them in plain text. But for the most part, if somebody's an administrator and other things, they're not debugging on a regular basis, then they're not going to see them. But yes, it will show up in plain text debug mode.
How are they stored in the register though? Is it base 64?
I can't remember what the base 64 was, but they are hashed, my memory.
Okay. So you can see it there as well.
Should not be able to see it in the registry. They should be hashed. I haven't checked lately. Should be. Can't remember. Okay, so your DB open, and this is for using any SQL ODBC compliant database. Get your connection, do your query, brings back information, and plays it here. These are my play integers, play string, your order number is, play integer, so on. Loops around, plays all the order numbers, and then it dumps out. So purely handlers based IVR.
Sorry, can you have multiple languages for the play strings and play integers and stuff like that?
Play string, you can with a play string extended if you have text-to-speech engines installed on your server. Technically, you can switch languages, yeah.
So you need a text-to-speech.
All nuance for somebody to get the different language accents properly in there. Yeah. And intelligent automation, quick overview. I'm going to run out of time here. Intelligent automation, or Genesys Intelligent Automation, is what used to be SpeechStorm, other things. It was a company that Genesys bought a few years ago, and it's basically something you can set up, call flows. People can call in, it feeds off to Intelligent Automation using voice XML. Intelligent Automation can prompt people, go back and forth, do some intelligent operations on the call using speech recognition, and then it can feed information back to Interaction Center. So, call flow editor, all that stuff. Did you all get the presentation? Is that something you got on the USB or whatever? And all the links are in there for seeing the information, how to use the call flow editor, set up all the call flows, what you're going to be looking for, listening to, and so on and so forth. It's a graphical interface. I'm not even going to begin to try and cover it here.
Is that something that's going to be replacing Attendant?
No, it's in addition to Attendant. So what we do right now is basically for intelligent automation, you have to install the CIC voice XML interpreter, which is a server piece or an off-server piece you install. We've used it for many years for voice XML, and now we just use that to feed off to intelligent automation. Configure all these call flows in intelligent automation, which is more like an intelligent speech bot for handling customer inquiries, that type of thing. I'm not going to call it AI. They probably market it as AI. Natural language AI integration, like it says there, we can integrate over to Amazon Lex, Poly, those things. And then there's some micro applications you have in there. But the main point I'm trying to get toward is that you have to, and I don't think they even have it in the documentation with PureConnect yet, that we can use the voice side. It's set up for chatbots right now, but you can also set it up for calls. Response. Open. Call forward. So it's real quick. Basically, the idea is you have to create XML nodes, and this particular version of it uses some tables that are stored, IP tables, for some of the information. Does a table lookup, pulls back the information that we're then going to put into the XML nodes. Add XML node, creating that there, dumps down. Once we add everything into the XML nodes, it's going to use this voice XML initiate, using the argument names that we built, the argument values that we built, so those are lists of strings basically. And then it's going to return some information after it communicates with that voice XML interpreter going off to Intelligent Automation. It does all its interaction there, and then it comes back. We get a response back from Intelligent Automation. We go into our parsing subroutine here, get the child nodes, loop around until we get all the child nodes out of it, which populates attributes on the interaction, and then you can use those attributes either back in the interaction attendant or in other handlers, that kind of thing. So unfortunately I don't have time to really dive deep into it because, like I said, that could be hours. But it gives you a flavor that, okay, you can write handlers, you can pass stuff off to the XML interpreter using those XML, the child nodes and all, get information back, parse the nodes out, and then use it in your handlers and in attendant. Yeah.
Okay, a quick one. While it's in Intelligent Automation, is it able to change attributes or call handlers?
There's no interaction that I know of during that time that it's over there in Intelligent Automation doing whatever that call flow does over there. We just send it there, it does its stuff, and then the session ends over there and comes back. So no, I don't think that can call any handlers of any kind. Maybe if they really played with some of the custom notification stuff, but I don't think it can. It's designed to be its own self-contained unit, doing all of its speech rec and then feeding off to Lex or whatever and doing all the wonderful things that it does on that side, and then comes back with results instead of going back and forth to Interaction Center. It's a bolt-on kind of thing. And then putting it all together, just show a couple things real quick, along with outbound attendant, and have a couple questions, and then let you all go to the party. Not that anybody wants to leave and go eat food and get free alcohol. I've been warned not to get upset when people start walking out on me. Okay, so back to interaction attendant. I already did the customer service one. I'll just look at the intelligent automation one real quick, just to kind of, you can almost see that. I can't increase the screen size, sorry. Oh, there I can. Okay. Well, that's not helping it. So, just in this transfer to intelligent automation, fairly simple setup here. It's a multi-action container. They have these different options, and I don't think I put numbers on them. No, I didn't. I could do fish it, set this up as a menu. I wasn't thinking earlier today, my brain had a fade. This should be a menu instead of a multi-action container. But basically, option 1 would be for this NLU option, 2 would be to authenticate themselves, 3 by an auto debit setup, 4 would be a password reset. So you choose which option there, and then you would pass it off to the intelligent automation to go ahead and run the subroutine. It's going to go do all that handler stuff, send off the data to intelligent automation, connect the call up, they're going to do their thing, they get a result back, and then coming back there's this play result, and I just set it up with a quick expression. So the result coming back, data about the current call. There's an attribute, cust_operation. So what type of operation was it? And I'll have a different expression for each one. So let's say if it comes back as so if the data that comes back is equal to, let's say, password reset, then it's going to play the string that says, okay, the result of your password reset is, so it plays text-to-speech, and then it plays whatever that attribute was. So attribute cust_password reset result, plays it as text. So you can build that little response there, place it back. You can do that with all the different pieces that come back from Intelligent Automation. You can set each one up to play back in an audio sequence, or all the pieces of it have 10 things in there you want to play back to them, whatever it is. So that's something you can do coming back from that Intelligent Automation call. So you send it off to the subroutine, you get the subroutine results back, and then you play those results here using the attributes that were set in the subroutine. The orders subroutine here, somebody calls in to check their order, dumps right into an order status, default action. I don't have any audio file set up there, it's just going to go right into gathering their order ID. So it's a caller data entry, 5 digits, plays it back, verifies. Once they verify, then it jumps down to check order status, which is my subroutine. That subroutine dumps into custom subroutine initiator router. And if it matches that order status, it's going to jump over the order lookup handler that we just looked at in the IVR. And instead of calling it from system IVR, we're going to call it from interaction attendant, jump right into it, and then play back the stuff within that handler. I could have passed back all the stuff as attributes and played it back in interaction attendant, but that's actually a bit harder. So I took the easy route, played it all in subroutine. That's one of the things. Do the easy stuff, be lazy, don't get too carried away. I always preach, be lazy. If you're getting out of your chair to go check stuff, you're working too hard. No. Think least effort to get the best result. We did attendant with handlers, attendant with handlers automation, and then outbound attendant. One thing real quick there, because we're almost out of time. What I did is I set up an outbound attendant. Now here, just get back to that real quick. You have a shortcut. You can set it up to point to the outbound attendant. So I just put a /outbound on the end of the shortcut, so it'll just automatically open the outbound attendant. I don't have to go in and tell it, okay, disconnect from my server. Now let's connect to my server. Let's choose the outbound attendant right now. That's too hard. Set up a shortcut. Go right into it. So here, I've just got a quick one set up. Small example. We've got a collections department, and we're going to do an automated outbound campaign, agentless. It's just going to pound calls with people and say, hey, you owe us money. Do you want to pay us right now, or do you want to talk to an agent? And if they choose to pay right now, that's option 1, make a payment. And it's going to jump into, actually I forgot to put in the subroutine, well there is a subroutine initiator, to make payment. So it jump into this make payment subroutine. Can't remember if I even programmed what or not. But basically, in the tools, you would have to, I think it's under telephony. There are secure session tools. I used them earlier. Right, I found them. Anyway, I set up a handler with Subroutine Initiator, and then a start secure session, dumps into the secure session to gather their payment information, jumps back out once they've finished their secure input to make their payment. Otherwise, we just transfer the collections queue, and that way it dumps to a collections agent. So instead of this being an outbound call, at that point it's really an inbound call coming into the queue. It's not really associated with the outbound campaign necessarily, although I think it will have that flag on there because it came through this outbound attendant configuration. There are other options you can put on here. I'm not going to get into those right now. We're running out of time. But to set up in IA, if we go look at the dialer setup, set up that campaign, collections agent list, and basically the automation side, set it up if a live person, then route to attendant profile and chose that attendant profile. So that's a setting on the campaign itself. Quick note here, training. We've got our newer website, training.genesys.com. If you get onto that website, there are a couple of tracks for the handler and call flows type stuff. So you've got the administering the CIC system plus configuring call flows, each 5 days total. And then also there's the, I don't know why I put platform SDK developer in there because I was not looking at what I was doing, I guess. There's really an interaction handlers course that you would do for learning how to build handlers. We used to have an advanced handlers course. It doesn't exist anymore. The other one may have been for intelligent automation. Anyway, last couple of minutes. Any questions?
Any prereqs on the handlers class?
No, we prefer that you have some kind of logical mindset, able to actually do a bit of development. It's not, it's not real complicated C#, C++ type programming, but it does help to be able to do program logic. Mathematicians do well. Yeah, there are no prerequisites for that per se. It helps to go through the administration course because it gives you the background on how the system works overall, but plenty of people listen to handlers.
Will there be a more intelligent automation more integrated into PureConnect rather than right now it's kind of a separate go and come back? Since attendance never really changed for a long time, is there going to be some better?
Yeah, there's talk about it, although most of what they're going towards these days is trying to just have integrations with their own products. I know that gets away from the whole intention of Interaction Center in the first place. We take the I out of CTI kind of thing. But it's more, we're going to have common code and we're going to jump out to it from whatever.
I get that whole idea, but then it's also completely separate, so it's harder to completely control what you have going on.
So I can't say yes or no on that one. I think they're looking that way. It's still building more and more. They haven't even really gotten very far into the integration itself yet. They mainly just have the chat stuff going, and then the voice XML is a bit more custom right now. So I think they're going to get more integrated, but I can't tell you for sure. Haven't seen that on the roadmap yet. Right. Anyways, yeah.
Is there a list of all customization points and system handlers? What they do and which order they're executed? Like, for example, a custom answer comes before custom incoming call.
No. I'm sorry to say. No, I mean, that's a very valid question. We used to have handler maps. In the old days, we had handler maps that showed, okay, this handler runs, then this one, and this one does an initiator that plays this other handler, and so on. We had in the help each handler and what it basically did. That was all there. At one point, they came out with the whatever it's called, dependency viewer. Sorry, they came out with dependency viewer in Interaction Designer. And at that point, development said, the handlers team said, hey, they can go into dependency viewer and they can see which handlers call which subroutines. They can build their own maps. They can do all that on their own, so we don't need to do it anymore. So the dependency viewer blew all that maps and documentation, all that stuff away. Sad to say. I was this close. I actually had approval. I had a developer online to actually create scripting that would crawl through the XML exports of the handlers and create those handler maps automatically, knowing how subroutines were called from these handlers and then which steps would actually generate an event that would run another handler. He was this close, and he was just about to start work on it, and then he got pulled off to work at something else. So, unfortunately, no. You can do it yourself, though.
I mean, if we do the export, are we getting the whole tree, like in this view?
Well, you can, yes, get the whole tree, but part of what's missing here is that some handlers use a tool step that sends an initiator event, which runs another handler that does not show up any place in here. So you kind of have gaps in the functionality.
Any plans to add a chat or SMS attendant?
I've not heard of that for PureConnect yet. I know we've already got that in PureCloud, so maybe we'll start branching it over to Attendant, or maybe we'll just do away with Attendant and replace it with Architect. Who knows? Originally, Architect was going to replace Attendant, but then they took it out and switched it over to the PureCloud code base. And yeah,
Is Architect something other separate from Intelligent Automation?
correct.
Or it is?
PureCloud Architect is the whole equivalent to Interaction Attendant, but it runs in PureCloud. And actually, it was built by the guys who created Interaction Process Automation, so it uses all the same interface, basically.
Is any mapping of attendant? Like some kind of export that we can see all the nodes?
Not that's available to you all. We do have an internal utility that we use with Visio. We can export the attendant configuration to Visio, but that's all internal. And I don't think they let that outside the company. So somebody could create it, but nothing that's available out there to just, I mean, you can print them, but no, there's no mapping that spits it out of the Visio real nice and
We
clean.
have a really old one and it's really long, so when you go there.
Yeah, I've seen the printouts of ones that are on the E-size plotter prints that go up on the, yeah. Fun, yeah.